Welcome to the WTR Small-Cap Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Tim Gerdeman, Vice Chair and Co-founder and Chief Marketing Officer of Water Tower Research. In today's podcast episode, I am joined by Chris Cooper, an aviation and energy industry veteran who last month started as CEO of XCF Global, NASDAQ, ticker symbol SAFX. XCF Global is one of the few publicly traded renewable fuel companies focused primarily on sustainable aviation fuel, also known as SAF. The company's first facility in Reno, Nevada, began producing neat SAF in February 2025, and the company is advancing several other projects in the US and Australia. Also joining us is my WTR equity research colleague, Peter Gastreich. Before we start today, please note that this discussion contains forward-looking statements regarding XCF Global's operations, financial condition, and business strategy. Actual results may differ materially from those projected due to risks and uncertainties. For a description of the factors that could cause actual results to differ, please refer to XCF Global's SEC filings, including the Risk Factors section of its most recent Form 10-Q, available at sec.gov or on the company's investor relations page at XCF Global. Good morning, Chris and Peter, and thank you for joining today's podcast.
Hey, good morning, Tim. Good morning, Peter.
Morning, Tim. Good morning, Chris.
Chris, to kick things off, could you please provide our audience with a high-level overview of XCF's business, please?
Absolutely. Looking forward to the opportunity of sharing with you guys and hopefully give your audience a brief vision into really the simplicity of what this energy transition is all about. And I think we can help by sharing a little bit more about XCF. We are a refiner, so similar to those refineries you see all around the country. What we've done is we've leveraged technology to actually use waste and residues, or what we'd otherwise would have called garbage. And we took that garbage and we ran it through our refinery. And lo and behold, we were able to use some amazing technology to produce what we know today as sustainable aviation fuel. And what that is derived from breaking down to a molecular level that waste and residue, or the garbage, to actually produce something pretty exciting. And so our role in the energy transition is one of producing a liquid fuel specifically for the use of aviation. And so sustainable aviation fuel that we're going to talk about today is a pretty exciting step forward. It's a now technology. So we have partners that have helped us in developing our refinery with special techniques and special technology that enable us to then produce this very special product. But it's a common refinery, rather typical. It's built in a modular design. So we put together a really exciting footprint that's small, it's nimble, it's able to be located in proximity to both airports and or other energy intense centers for the purpose of really producing these transitional technologies such as sustainable aviation fuel. So pretty excited about the footprint. This is a refinery that had been built a few years back and has been continually growing in its ability to produce. Initially, it was built to produce a renewable diesel that's used in the road transportation space. But we made the commitment at XCF to convert to a pure SAF play, or become a player in the sustainable aviation fuel production pathway, which meant we wanted to focus on what we like to call the hard to abate sectors. So we're in a business of helping our customers, and we figured aviation was the best place to start solving the more difficult problems.
That's a great overview. I appreciate it. Before I pass the podcast over to Peter to ask several questions, Chris, please share with our audience your professional background.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I'm happy to tell you, I started out as a impressionable young man wanting to be a pilot. So I started in this industry actually learning to fly, and many of those airplanes, they're actually not even flying today, but all of those airplanes were exciting to me and really meeting my passion, where I had the opportunity of developing both my personal aspirations as well as professional. But what I found out rather quickly was that I was better at the business aspect of aviation than I was the piloting. And so after receiving what's pretty much the equivalent of an air transport certificate, I actually operated on the professional side, and Chevron recruited me to join them for the development and expansion of their branded business aviation and aviation distribution from all of their refineries. So what I was jumped into was the conventional distribution of aviation fuels. And so I had many different roles and responsibilities from marketing, operations, logistics, and many different regions from the Western US to Latin America to ultimately a global role where I distributed all of our fuels worldwide for the purpose of, again, on airport into aircraft throughout the world, and actually provided exchanges in developing those logistics and operations. But then subsequently was recruited by Phillips 66, which Phillips gave me a different perspective of the aviation industry by introducing me to the production side. So most specifically, I was working in the production and distribution of our aviation fuels. So from all of the refining complex of the Phillips 66 business, we distributed anything that went into a pipeline, into a truck, into a ship. That was part of my business and operations of logistics and bringing product to market. So it was really very much about distributing products until finally I had the opportunity to be recruited by Neste. And Neste is the world's largest producer of renewable fuels. And so specifically, I was charged with the role of developing our sustainable aviation fuel business and ultimately launching that worldwide. That opportunity was one of bringing product to market for the first time. So it was really understanding the industry, but really leveraging my experience in my past. So that gave me an opportunity to grow until ultimately I became the president of Neste, in which I focused most of my time in the feedstock or those products that we use to produce our sustainable aviation fuel, as well as the logistics operations required to do business in the renewable diesel space, the chemical, pardon me, the chemical and polymer space, as well as the refining space. And I was involved in the joint venture development of a refinery in Martinez, California. But ultimately, all of that was this experience that really is the business of aviation in America today and ultimately globally. So when the opportunity to join XCF came about, it was a terrific opportunity for me, and I'll share more as we discuss today. But pretty cool to see that the sum of all of my experience is really what I'm able to leverage as I move forward with XCF.
That is really cool. And I don't find myself saying this often on podcasts, but what a perfect professional background for your current role that has to give you instant credibility with downstream users. So now over to you, Peter.
Thanks, Tim. So Chris, yeah, I concur with Tim on that. You've got an exceptional profile and career with a lot of leading companies, and of course your aviation background as well. But you're coming into your new role now at XCF, and if you take this lens of your professional experience, what's really kind of appealed to you most about joining the company, and what do you see as XCF's role in the industry and its key competitive advantages?
Well, one of the neatest opportunities, really, Peter, Tim, is that this is an energy transition. But what I think a lot of people aren't focusing on is although we've brought technology together to produce these products, such as renewable diesel, or in the case of XCF, the development of our production of sustainable aviation fuel, this transition really wouldn't have come about if it weren't for our ability to leverage existing technologies. So although there are very special refining technologies that we use to convert these garbage materials into the treasure that I describe as SAF or renewable diesel, unlike conventional oil and gas, we are not introducing new carbon into our process. So we're using those garbage or wastes and residues to produce our product. But that's not any special technology. What we're doing is we're using experience that I've acquired from both my past and working in the industry of refining. Again, a conventional refining simply takes crude oil and produces it through a refinery. Well, that's not going to support us in an energy transition to bring about lower carbon fuels. So what we do is we've attracted and brought low carbon fuels, or in this case, carbon that's previously existed in another form, such as used cooking oil, or a distiller's corn oil, which is a waste product or residue associated with the ethanol production. And we take those technologies and we embed them into the existing refining complex. So I think by being able to leverage really my past in the conventional energy space, we've been able to leverage the new technologies of transitioning these wastes as feedstocks into the same production. So it's really recycling that old experience and making it new in the renewable space. So I'm very excited about my ability to, again, arrive at XCF, but then with the knowledge and the sum of experience to then commercialize the product. And that's really important because XCF is again an early entrant into this space. We have a refinery. That's probably the most amazing thing is we have a refinery in Reno. But that refinery really is all about leveraging experiences. So we have a team that has experiences from former refineries and other refining businesses, as well as logistics and operations. So that really helps us as we come together in this energy transition to realize the value of experience and the benefits that this new technology provides us to produce into the future.
And looking back at your experience, I think it's notable there's at least two companies I can see here that you've worked with or worked for during your career that are also, have partnerships with XCF. I'm referring, of course, to Phillips 66 and BGN. What can you tell us about how these and the other partnerships, there's many for XCF, how do those really play to the company's strengths?
Yeah, let me start by kind of sharing a little bit about the way your listeners might understand better. Vertical integration is common, so we're actually very familiar with the super major oil companies of America and those global companies as they've vertically integrated. So what they've done is they've accomplished everything from oil production, so their crude oil production comes from drilling holes in the ground, introducing new carbon into the atmosphere by bringing that oil to then their refineries where they then produce finished products like gasoline and diesel and jet fuel and other products that we use every day. And then distributing those products through a branded network of distribution. And in many instances, although the oil companies no longer own their gas stations, they have a brand. So really we refer to it in the industry as upstream, which is the drilling for oil, and downstream, which is the distribution of refined products. So what this space in renewables now has provided is opportunities such as those for XCF to strategically align so that we're not immediately required to become vertically integrated or wholly integrated in our ability to access feedstocks, which may in this case require taking delivery of used cooking oil from the back of your favorite restaurants, right? That seems implausible or very difficult for us to integrate as we did in the past. But what we find is we can partner and we have relationships. So in this case, we reference Phillips 66, who's been an exciting partner to XCF as we began production. So Phillips 66 has been providing through their partnerships the ability to access some of the waste and residue feedstocks that we use. And we can then leverage that benefit of that relationship. And so as that production comes through, the feedstock comes for production, XCF is able to focus exclusively on its expertise, which at this time had been focused primarily around production. And so then the production of the renewable diesel or sustainable aviation fuel occurs, and then we're able to distribute that fuel with what we call an offtake agreement directly back to Phillips 66, and then it's able to integrate that product into its infrastructure, or as I described, its downstream businesses, the logistics, the terminaling, the blending for ultimately the distribution to an airport and ultimately to an airline. BGN's another exciting proposition because that's a partnership that brings together the logistics and infrastructure. So the ability that XCF will have to partner with the likes of BGN will give us the ability to expand production opportunities, but more specifically, the logistics and the operations that a company like BGN provides. They have many, many vessels that travel the world. They're one of the largest trading companies that's moving hydrocarbons in a commercial level that's amazing, the volume that they move worldwide. But we're able to leverage that as we extend our reach and begin to leverage that partnership for our ability to then expand into other markets and around the world. As we begin to bring things together, we'll see that those partnerships are important as we leverage those logistics. So again, the purpose of vertical integration, bringing value, it's one that we believe we could accomplish through partnerships, and these strategic partnerships give us the ability to then execute on that vertical type of integration that we're going to need to be more efficient and more effective as we distribute our sustainable aviation fuels.
Okay, that's very, very impressive. I'll come back to operations in a moment here, and a bit more about the strategy, but I just wanted to, step back, maybe, the 30,000 foot perspective, if you will, kind of how you view sort of the sustainable aviation fuel market, and what should investors, what do they need to understand about this market opportunity at hand and what XCF is going after in the SAF industry?
Absolutely. Well, it's a pretty exciting time because what where we've arrived is we've realized, and let me start really with the industry is doing its best to address some issues it has. And one of the primary issues are the emissions produced in combustion. So as aircraft fly across the skies, we see white streaks. Those white streaks contain greenhouse gases and or uh, aromatics that contribute to greenhouse gases that ultimately pollute our atmosphere. However, the conversion of aviation is very difficult. It's about a 40-year transition for re-engineering an aircraft. And so that's a long ways away. Well, when change is required today for us to continue to experience air travel worldwide in a meaningful way, where emerging economies or individuals who wish to know the world, or we travel for commerce, for business, for family, for pleasure, all of those have a cost. And as we address that cost of pollution, what we believe at XCF is that we can become a meaningful player in providing a solution. The solution I'm referring to is the sustainable aviation fuel. And although it's going to take 40 years to come up with a new aircraft, or long haul aircraft, for example, would be very difficult to electrify, similar to what we did in road transportation. That conversion or electrification of aircraft is many, many years away. So anecdotally, we don't have extension cords to help the industry out. Likewise, at the airport level, sustainable aviation fuel is a drop-in solution, which means that we have no additional infrastructure costs. We're not converting facilities, we're not converting pipelines, we're not converting airport into plane services in order to distribute. And as I mentioned, we're not changing the airplanes either. So what's really exciting about SAF is that it's a drop-in solution, which means no future or further costs associated with the conversion of any of the assets or any of the stakeholders that we need to distribute the fuel. So that's probably one of the most exciting propositions that the product has, is that it is very much available today for immediate drop-in solution for reducing emissions, or the term that's used, decarbonization of aviation. So I think it's important to realize that this transition has come about in a couple different ways. One, through mandates. We're all familiar with the European mandate that exists today, but many more that are coming around in emerging markets like Brazil, in Korea. One's been announced in Southeast Asia, as well as Malaysia and Singapore. But as these mandates have come about, they've drawn more of the product around the world. In the U.S., we have incentives that are helping us grow, and those incentives provide us the ability to attract the airlines through their partnerships. Those partnerships are very important because although SAF is incrementally more expensive than jet fuel, it's because it serves two purposes. The first purpose is the propulsion, which I mentioned is identical and is a drop-in. But second, and most important, is the emission reduction. So we're actually producing a product that reduces emissions compared to jet fuel in a life cycle evaluation of up to 80%. So a significant reduction in emissions. But in order to do that, we need partnerships. We need all of the constituents to the table. And what we've found is a lot of success by bringing the airlines together with their customers, the Nikes, the Amazons, the Googles, Microsofts, Deloitte. These are just to name a few. Those people that have arrived at the table and work together with the airlines so that they can bring SAF to their business, and then utilize SAF to reduce their emissions, both as corporations, but then enabling the airline to acquire more SAF so that it can then more broadly use SAF, and then suppliers like XCF are able to grow into the space of production. I'm sorry for the length of that answer, but there's a lot in that question that I hope I was able to cover.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. In another area, hydrogen was something people were talking about a lot too there, and that has really been pushed back. Evidenced earlier this year when Airbus pushed back their plans by at least 10 years, right? So it doesn't appear that there's really any competing technology to SAF for a very, very long time to come yet.
No, that's a great point, Peter. It's just the reality is if it costs an aircraft manufacturer 40 to 50 years to transition, we realize that our 2030 goals of our customers, the airlines, and our 2050 global goals, they need to be expedited. So today's solution is one that's not borrowing from and taking from someone. It's actually producing from what is waste and residue, or what otherwise would have been directed to a landfill. So a pretty cool opportunity. Hydrogen, however, again, it will have its place in the future, but it is very intensive when it comes to electricity, which we know we're all very much competing for in this new energy transition.
Right, absolutely. So let's circle back to XCF here. So, the company has had, to say this, that the company's had a big year would certainly be an understatement. You've had the public listing, a lot of major developments, partnerships, a lot of things that are propelling the company forward. Looking back, what would you say have been the most notable achievements of the company?
Wow, I tell you, celebration is always short-lived, especially in our space. But the energy transition is one that we are very much on the cusp. We are very much just starting. So again, we celebrate quick, we celebrate often because there are a lot of successes that we've seen. And again, our NASDAQ filing was a great accomplishment. And again, because that gives us the ability to exist in spaces that we hope our customers and consumers respect. And that is one of traceability, accountability, and our ability to deliver on our promises. And we believe that by being part of the NASDAQ listed company, it gives us the ability to be transparent to our consumers and our customer base in every aspect of our business. And so whether it is the emission reduction in the products we're producing, or just our stewardship that we have as a corporation responding to our shareholders' needs and demands, we hope that transparency gives us an opportunity to stand out amongst our peers. But those are reasons to celebrate. But again, as they are short-lived, what we're now into is our phase of commercialization. So really, as we complete the conversion of the technologies that exist in our refinery in New Rise, Reno, what we're finding is that those additional upgrades will give us the ability to be more efficient, more effective, and more reliable as we're producing our sustainable aviation fuel. So completing in those the advancements in our refinery, the conversion of some very special and unique technology I'll mention to you shortly, but expanding our production partnerships and licensing. So what you'll see is that this project that we have, we call it our New Rise 1 facility. What it actually occupies and represents is an amazing tool. It gives us the ability to fit in markets of diverse sizes, but primarily those emerging markets that need smaller refining footprint. Also those that aren't beholden exclusively to major oil, but actually have the opportunity where smaller investing groups, such as those that started New Rise, are able to participate. And so that's by putting a small 3,000 barrel a day. And so let me give you an idea. That's about 38 million gallons a year of sustainable aviation fuel production. But what that gives us the ability to do is put that in many different and various places in various countries in various markets. And so unlike a massive refinery project, that's pretty exciting technology that we're able to build in very specific markets. And you may have already read about Australia. The opportunity we had to advance one of these opportunities is a 3 refinery project in Australia that will be starting in 2026. So very exciting as we expand. But more than anything, I think our successes have helped us organizationally and becoming more mature and being able to look at opportunities. We have many opportunities that will be coming about as a result of these relationships and the expansion of partnerships. So many of them will be other refineries, other projects will bring about the ability for us to be more vertically integrated with assets and our ability to perform within. But again, I think the way our people have embraced these transitions is the most amazing. And so having a like-minded team working together, pushing this renewable agenda forward has been very exciting as we work together through the ramp up of all of our strategy, we're going to continue to see growth. We're going to continue to see expansion as we continue to celebrate. And again, they will be short celebrations, but we'll continue to find more as we move forward.
And that modular aspect of the technology is certainly, key. And I'd say that it's very strong evidence and really validates that strategy when you have, so much interest overseas, for example, in Australia. It kind of tells you this can operate in multiple places and a lot of interest here and also, globally for that.
Yeah.
But no, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just a really an interesting paradigm that we seldom think about. Is we've existed for many years under the economies of scale that have produced major refineries, major massive complex and facilities. Well, this transition has opened the door for opportunities with our technology partners to build smaller scale. By building smaller scale, we're able to actually address the markets that need most urgent help and the most urgent solution for their needs. But it's also cool because you have markets that are able to introduce mandates, introduce tools that help drive demand or create demand. And then within quick turnaround, we're able to build and deploy facilities in those markets that produce the right size volume. Now, interestingly, we've announced the new Rise 2 facility in Reno. And that's because of the beauty of the design. We're able to not only have our original facility in its scope and size, but we're able to plug in right next to it and actually leverage a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of those assets that can then supply both facilities, give us the ability to simply place another footprint right next to our existing refinery, thus duplicating our production capacity. So not only are we already at almost 40 million, we could become an 80 million gallon a year facility. So it's really an amazing technology and amazing for the times because we're able to build the right size facility for the right markets as they need and create partnerships accordingly.
Okay, absolutely. And let's talk about New Rise. And maybe we can talk about your New Rise 1, which is your current operating facility, which has been in operation since February. It has been, since that time early this year, pretty rough for both SAF renewable diesel markets. A lot of companies have actually struggled with these industry conditions earlier in the year. And I'd just like to ask, against this backdrop, what's been the experience so far for New Rise 1 and what lies ahead for that first facility?
Well, I think what's important is to realize that we've been in a period for probably many years now of policy changes and evolutions. What I believe what we found recently is that the policy didn't provide us the length necessary. And so a lot of the refiners found that they were building refineries on promises that really wouldn't have the tenure or the long-term staying power that they needed. So there was always nerves, there were always concerns around some of the policies. I'll speak specifically to one, which was called a blender's tax credit. That was created so that the ethanol producers and the gas stations would blend ethanol into gasoline that you're all familiar with. What was important is that that policy came and went many times over its 10, 15-year history. A lot of things have come and provided more clarity. So again, some of the policies that we have today that we're working with have actually assisted us in creating assurances in our asset deployment. And so what's very exciting is the 45Z as a program has helped us so that it's not only focusing specifically on made in America products, made in America products from made in America feedstocks. It's enabling us as an industry to create more transparency towards our path forward, because that transparency has been necessary to see what are the policymakers thinking of what's next. How are they going to see policy that will help us move forward and have the history necessary so that we can make the capital investments necessary to rely on this as future for our energy transition. But it's important to realize that the absence of those long-term policies remain an issue. So I think as we continue to work with policymakers, we'll continue to work to expand on them and see the beneficial future that we believe that again, that policy base will help us grow into. But most importantly, we even saw a transition at New Rise. As I mentioned previously, New Rise was built as a renewable diesel producer. What we saw, and or again my predecessor saw, was an immediate demand for road transportation. In fact, the primary policy that came about was specific towards road transportation. So it was the emission reduction schemes required for, again, bringing down gasoline emissions by introducing ethanol blending, as well as then the expansion of renewable products or biodiesel products into the diesel pool, which also then helped reduce emissions. So pretty exciting policies, and New Rise jumped into that space for the production of renewable diesel. What it found, however, was the rapid pace at which sustainable aviation fuel adoption was occurring. We realized that the benefits would be those around the production of sustainable aviation fuel as a future project. As I mentioned, electrification of road transportation, it's something that we're seeing, and it's happening at a reasonable pace. The electrification of air transportation, not going to be a near-term solution. So we're finding these solutions as being important. So making that transition was important. We worked very closely with our technology provider, Axens, and again, we'll be concluding with our conversion of our catalyst, what they call their vegan catalyst technology, which allows us to be a fully operational sustainable aviation fuel producer, decided to then redeploy as a 100% sustainable aviation fuel provider and producer. So exciting through this transition, but there was a little bit to learn, there's a little bit to grow from, and I think that was more important than anything was the New Rise team gaining the experience that they needed for us to make this transition to sustainable aviation fuel as an exclusive product.
Okay, that's great. I want to circle back to a macro question, but just want to make sure we've got, you introduced New Rise Reno 2. You mentioned that a little bit earlier and talked a bit how that, fits into your, broader growth strategy. Was there anything else regarding New Rise or anything that we missed in terms of the recent announcement by the company for New Rise 2?
No, I think it's important though to just realize that what this provides us is many of the surrounding states. So we're leveraging this market because of the accessibility it provides us to the mandates that exist, everything from Oregon, Washington, the mandates, excuse me, the policies that exist in California, but we believe we're within close proximity. And so for the purpose of expansion, we believe that there will be continued growth and demand in these marketplaces. And so we hope to continue to expand. And so although New Rise 2 is a project that we've already cleared the roads, we've already done the grading and the work to improve the land in preparation. We're looking forward to this expansion. We also believe that this expansion brings us the synergies that we need to operate the assets that we have on ground more efficiently, creating those economies of scale as we are able to reduce our operating costs and deliver these products, sustainable aviation fuel, more ratably, more reliably into the marketplace.
Okay, great. So yeah, this has been very, comprehensive in terms of XCF. I'd just like to, before we close here, circle back one more macro-related question. So you have a very clear strategy in terms of executing your pipeline of projects. I'm curious what your thoughts are about the prospects of SAF industry supply overall. All indicators point to demand growth just going on exponentially for a number of years. But what do you think the prospects are for the supply to kind of keep up with that, and what will that mean for XCF? And are you building a first mover advantage here?
I think we have. I think what's exciting is we hope to again exercise that opportunity that it provides us, based primarily on experience, because we believe that early mover role is one of education, of learnings, and hopefully we can deploy those learnings as we expand. But I think what happened in the marketplace, we all should realize, is we were building a business, we were building supply to sustain ultimately what would be the mandated markets. So primarily focusing on Europe, we realized that Europe had dates of transition, and so as the product became available and was producing, it was being produced at excess for the demand at hand. And so what we found was that we became oversupplied rather quickly. And so I think adjustments like that ultimately have been smoothed out in that the mandate did kick in. And once the mandate kicked in, what we saw was the demand curve move. What we hope to be able to do is continue to identify those transitions and be sure that we're ahead of them so that we're right sizing our production for today as well as right sizing it for tomorrow. Our view of tomorrow is that SAF will continue to grow, and as mandates continue to grow globally as well, we'll find that those demand instructions come specifically from obligations that both the suppliers, the users, and the traveling community can together face and develop these solutions together. But again, I think with our modular design, our ability to license globally and put refineries together with, again, great technology partners and a great solution, we're able to bring these answers to the industry. So the question of, are we ready for our 2030 goals? We believe that yes. We believe that XCF is poised to substantially assist our customers in reaching those aspirational goals for 2030. 2050, absolutely. I think that the world is realizing that we have an existential threat. The industry can't elect the alternative of just not flying or reducing air travel. We need to embrace air travel, but we need to embrace it in the cleanest, most efficient way possible. And we believe that's through sustainable aviation fuel.
Great. Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a great introduction both to you and your new role and also to XCF. So we'll look forward to hosting you again for another Water Tower Research event in the future and suggest investors stay tuned to WTR for content on the company. Before I pass over to Tim, just want to see if you have any concluding remarks.
No, Peter, Tim, thank you both for hosting me this opportunity. Again, it's something that I look forward to sharing even further and more of my passion. I guess since those early days of being a pilot, I felt I've become a steward for this industry. So converting to renewables is just one step further in my effort and my ambition to help sustain and foster this industry as it moves forward into this renewable future.
Thank you very much. Tim, over to you.
Well, Chris and Peter, thanks for your time today. And I got to say, Chris, based on your comments, 2026 looks to be a really exciting year for XCF Global. So I look forward to watching your progress ahead and have a great end of the year.
Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you again, Peter.
Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, as well as visiting www.watertowerresearch.com to stay up to speed on the company's small cap written research reports, podcasts, fireside chats, industry-specific symposiums, and conference schedules. We will see you next time for another edition of the WTR Small Cap Spotlight podcast. Finally, a special thanks to the producer and editor of the podcast, Krista Fitzpatrick.